Well, thank you for being here. I suspect we all wish we could have started the press conference a little bit later. West Indies now has 37 runs to make from 29 balls. So the innings is getting really interesting there. And I have a lot of trepidations here. I'm worried that they sometimes, as uh, they collapse before making the runs. I hope not. I hope we win. Today, I want to just confirm something that we all in Guyana have come to realize, that what we have now in our government is a state-sponsored kleptocracy. And I'm going to demonstrate today how pernicious this is, how widespread it is. And week after week we talk about it, but it seems as though it has no end whatsoever. And the corruption is so widespread that it affects almost all of the state entities involved. So we've seen in the media finally SPU coming out and speaking about the bond, and although they sought to give some explanations on the bond, they did not address the fundamental issue as to why you have to borrow $30 billion and you drew down 17 billion of the 30 billion, and you have most of it sitting in a bank account. I'm not sure up to this point in time, because up to recently it was not an interest-bearing account, and yet you have to pay 4.75% interest on the money that you took, which would run us into billions of dollars. We've already heard they've paid over 800 million in interest alone. And then, so no answer about the economic rationale as to this decision to borrow. The only thing that we can find a logical explanation is that they rushed to borrow because of the fee structures involved. It made a lot of people get a lot of money from just putting together this bond, because when that happens, several people benefit from it, including those who have put the bond together for the government. They get a percentage of the total value of the bond. So no explanation from SPU about this. Then we heard that some money was given to Gaisuco, but Gaisuco is not accounting for the money. This narrative was then disputed by the head of Gaisuco, Mr. Davis. And he said that SPU and NISIL, they're trying to use Gaisuco as a scapegoat. So clearly these are two government agencies that are involved in the same sector, but they're at war with each other. And who suffers? It's the industry that suffers. Now, we find it very unusual that Mr. Heath London would be both the head of SPU and NISIL. And so I believe that one of the reasons for putting him there, and this I had explained before, I had expressed this concern before, is this government has bypassed the white paper that we tabled in Parliament and the structure that we had put in place for every privatization. which is the privatization unit, a technical unit which fell under NISIL, doing all the studies, the public advertisements, etc., and then taking the recommendations to the board of NISIL, which included the private sector, the labor movement, and consumer affairs, along with ministers. And then that recommendation is taken to the cabinet. Now, recognize what has happened here is that privatization decisions are made by NISIL and SPU on their own now. They don't have any scrutiny from the private sector, the labor movement, or consumer affairs, because they have effectively dismantled that mechanism, which would have an oversight mechanism. So that is why on a daily basis we hear issues about who is selling out what, and with no regard for transparency. So one morning we wake up and we hear that land is being sold on the East Coast, and you don't have clarity between the Gaisuko or NISIL who owns the land. Gaisuko says they're selling the land, and then NISIL says, oh, in the vesting order, we got this land. But it's not just who owns the land, it's the process through which you privatize land if you're going to privatize it. It has to go to the board of these entities. So even the ones that they're complained about, APNOD complained and said, oh, the prices were low. It went through the process of going to privatization unit, board of NISIL, and then to cabinet. So that's the first issue. We've seen this confusion here. We hear about Wales now selling out land. And to my surprise, I see ExxonMobil getting land there again. And now I had not said anything about Exxon acquiring land on a lease basis to build their headquarters. But really, this is overbearing. Where are the opportunities for Guyanese? And I have some big concerns. Would ExxonMobil be financing all of these things from Cost Oil, or will it be from their direct investments in Guyana, the headquarters and this new project? And should they not, if they're going to do it directly, should they not be buying land at market value rather than leasing land from the government at a peppercorn rent? Should those opportunities not be preserved for Guyanese? So before we know it, if this information is true, it seems as though half of the country or all of these things would be given out to Exxon on a preferential basis. I'm very concerned about this because I held my tongue when they did it for the headquarters, because we have had no explanation whatsoever from the government. But today's paper, I saw another 50 acres. Guyanese should be benefiting from these if they have a preferential policy for land, for them to develop their businesses. So that's one. That is a very big concern of ours about the lack of transparency surrounding all of this rush to privatize. Everybody is in a little hustle now before the decision comes out from the CCJ or before we go to elections. They're all in the hustling mode. So then further to this, we hear about privatization of Kanji, and that a consortium of Indians and Ghanaians are going to buy Rose Hall Estate. And frankly speaking, I don't think it will happen. But it cannot happen transparently because they've refused to make public the report that PricewaterhouseCoopers did, because they're the advisors to the government on the valuation of assets that are now available for privatization. And we have called on them several times to make public. This is not a state secret. This doesn't belong to Jordan or Heath London or or David Hines. And you don't have to have a PPP mole in there to release this information. This is a taxpayer's assets that will be privatized, and a report is commissioned using taxpayers' money to establish the valuation of these assets. That report should be made public. That report should be made public. And so we have no issue, or the valuation is not released, and we hear about this privatization. And this will be another sweetheart deal. And if they think it will succeed, then it will not, because we have a ton of issues that we're going to raise. So this brings me to Rose Hall and what's happening now. So you know, when we heard that when PricewaterhouseCoopers did the valuation, they listed the assets. And so they have a list of operable assets and unserviceable assets. And the unserviceable assets are to be disposed. Like if you have a derelict tractor or something of that sort, you dispose of it. So we heard now also that the SPU has placed a gentleman there to be in charge of Rose Hall. And he is now in charge of Rose Hall, but he also has a harvesting contract at Albion. So he's managing Rose Hall for SPU, but he has a harvesting contract at Rose Hall, and using the assets of Rose Hall to execute that contract. That's the first issue. Secondly, what they have done is to move assets from the operable list to the unserviceable list and are disposing these assets. So I've heard that a tractor, a TM 740, which costs about $15 million, sold for less than $500,000 to friends and family of big APNU officials. And so this is, now they're using Rose Hall. First of all, taking the assets that are serviceable and moving them operable and moving them to the unserviceable level and selling them out to friends and family. And PricewaterhouseCoopers, a big international firm, must be seeing this. And I'm sure if they are not complicit, they should speak out about it. Because by the time you're ready, if you privatize there, if they privatize, the real value would be diminished seriously, because all the operable assets are gone at a peppercorn valuation and sale, and no advertisement whatsoever. So the only place we can turn to now, because Transparency International, I see they're doing a bit now, but I hope that they look at it too, and the Auditor General and the newspapers and the media, because I'm making a plea. The media doesn't seem to be interested in these issues, but to make a plea to ask how many assets have been sold from Rose Hall Estate, and when they were advertised, and then check whether these assets were on the operable list in the PricewaterhouseCoopers valuation study and have now been moved to the unserviceable level, and then who they were sold to, and finally whether the person in charge now has a cane harvesting contract, person in charge of Rose Hall at Albion. These are questions that the media must pursue, and Guyana must pursue, because there's a wholesale rape of resources. We have seen, I heard the expenditure at the LBI launch that they built using the bond money is unbelievably high, the expenditure. That's where they go to fete and party at nights, etc. That's what's going on in this industry. Secondly, I want to share this out with you. These are some vehicles, 2 Land Cruisers that were seized in Letem, that from what I gather, they have Venezuelan, I think, number plates there. And so these assets, it warrants a full investigation. I heard the GRA seized these Land Cruisers in May. And then what happened, you remember they were seized in May. The Land Cruisers were registered in March to show that they were owned and they got registered. So the register was backdated for both of them to the 14th of March 2019. That is, they were registered in Guyana, the registration office, but they were seized in May. So that meant backdating. I heard that in the GRO, not the GRO, the License Revenue Office, that vehicles, there is an entry you have to make. So about the source of the vehicle. It can either come through sale, importation, or if you purchase it from want of entry. That is from the government. But if you purchase from want of entry, it has to be gazetted. I'm told that in their records is left blank. Blank. And you should find out who these vehicles were registered to. They're a PNC bigwig, one of the top PNC officials that these vehicles were registered to. And so this brings me to a bigger racket that we've been tracking for a while now that runs into billions of dollars of foregone revenue at GRA. What has happened is that all the luxury vehicles that they seize or come in and go into want of entry, they would never register them into the want of entry logs. So these are not auctioned. They are kept there off books and then given to key officials in government or friends of families of ministers, etc. And it runs into billions of dollars because all the luxury vehicles fall in this category. This is a major issue. I have more information on the issue, but I hope that the media would follow up. Later we'll release the additional information. Let's hear what GRA will say about this now. How vehicles they seize at the border in May would end up in the hands of a PNC bigwig and be registered on the 14th of March. And these are 2 Land Cruisers. So, as I said, kleptocracy, that's just a reflection of it there too. So, the past 2 press conferences, I had pointed out that in 2018, the children of one or of the, well, I don't know how many the person has, but let me just say 2018, $50,000 was transferred from the Ministry of the Presidency, the Department of Public Service, to the account of a child of Simona Brooms. And in 2019, another $36,450, US dollars I'm talking about, was transferred to that same child. This is 86,000 US dollars, over $17 million, went from the Ministry of the Presidency, the Public Service Division, to that child. In 2018, another child of the minister got transferred from the same Office of the President, the Ministry of the Presidency Public Service Division, $2,510,575. So combined, over $20 million, because the other one was over 70. Over $20 million. Now clearly, as a country, this is taxpayers' money. This is not Simona Broom's money. This is not Harman's money. This is taxpayers' money. And clearly, we need an explanation. Let the country decide if the explanation is a plausible one. So we've been asking for an explanation. And guess what? Silence from the Ministry of the Presidency and silence from Simona Brooms, a person who is very, very vocal on other matters. You know, boom out videos, etc. But we're not seeing anything, no response on this one. It's silence. But what has happened since that is worrisome? So clearly, this government, because people are releasing more information on them, the whistleblowers. So the week before, Winston Jordan felt that the PPP had sleeper cells in government because they disclosed that he was bringing in a BMW. Now, you're a public official. This is not like your private citizen, Winston Jordan. You're a public official using an official duty-free concession. It should be made public. It's not a sleeper cell you need to do this. Anybody should release this. This is information that because you're bringing in this vehicle for official use. That is what it's described, for official use. So they had a big issue about that. So clearly, the government felt that this information came from the Public Service Ministry, Office of the President, to us. But the information did not come from the Public Service Ministry. We got the information elsewhere from another whistleblower. So guess what the response has been? The response has been the minister goes there and fired all the personnel staff and the accountant. That is what their response is. Information that we should know about. It's not their money. There is no secrecy about how you spend our money, taxpayers. But they fired all the staff of the personnel department. And they fired the accountant. And clearly, they're worried that within that department, you have many more secrets. Many more secrets. And they thought that those people released the information, and they did not. So they now get unfairly dismissed. They just unfairly dismiss them using some spurious excuse of restructuring. Now, if you're restructuring, you will give people notice and all of that, or try to move them out. A lot of these people have had 30 years in the civil service. The minister went in, and illegally, ministers can't do this, illegally fired the staff with immediate effect. So they were responding to that because they're worried about what other secrets would be revealed there. And we already know that very same minister was a recipient of a scholarship. We don't know how many millions were spent on her scholarship, and many other ministers might be in a similar position where they either receive large sums of money or their children or relatives. And so clearly there'd be a lockdown there now. They will put some people there who are party hacks, and all the files will disappear. All the files will disappear. That is an attempt to disappear all the files going on now. They're covering their tracks there because they're worried more would be revealed. So then the Chronicle said, the Ministry of Presidency is debunking claims that the entire personnel department at the Department of Public Service and its chief accountant were dismissed. On Monday, Deputy Director of Press Affairs at the Ministry of Presidency, Ariana Gordon, told Guyana Chronicle that while allegations have been leveled against the public service employees, they were not dismissed. The civil servants in question have not been dismissed. Some allegations have been leveled against them, and those allegations would be a subject of an investigation. So I have here, this is Chronicle saying this, and I have the letter from the minister. And the letter says, I'm not going to read the whole letter, pursuant to the aforementioned contract of employment, your services are hereby terminated with immediate effect. With immediate effect, that is now. You don't have a notice, you don't have anything else. Now, any and all property belonging to the government of Guyana that currently resides in your possession must, as a matter of course, be forthwith returned to support continuity and efficiency of the work of the ministry. And this was signed by a minister dismissing people now who are in the public service. This is illegal too, the minister acting in this manner. So this is what we've had. So then the Afro-Guyanese rights activist, David Hines, weighs into the matter. And he says government needs to flush out PPP molds from public service. When people, these are not PPP molds who are sending us information. These are good, decent Guyanese who are offended by the wanton corruption that's taking place in the government circles at the top levels, and then they want to expose them because they're offended. These are good, decent people, Guyanese. So he is calling for a purge, a commission of inquiry. This is like, it's worse than even what Volder Lawrence said. This is like one of those that Hitler had. You know, you just do a purge, have a commission of inquiry and call in every member of the public service and find out, are you a PPP mole or not? And then if you're a PPP mole, you get fired from the public service. This is a human rights activist. This is a black rights activist. The people who were fired were all Afro-Guyanese. They were all Afro-Guyanese, but he's not concerned about that now. You know what he's concerned about? Defending perks. Because I heard the minister who did this act is related to him, but even if not, we know how close he's been advocating because she's a member of the WPA. And so when it's corruption, protecting corruption, or protecting your own turf or your own perks, all the black rights activism gone out the window. What about those people who were fired unfairly, the Afro-Guyanese? Or what about this human rights? People are entitled to work wherever, not be subjected to tests of which party they support. That's something that is alien. And thirdly, what about whistleblowers? Everywhere in the world, people give greater rights to whistleblowers. This, even if it is, they released it, and even if they're PPP, and they're not. They have a right to do so based on the legislation we pass. If they see corrupt activities in government, they have a right to disclose it. And these people should be rewarded, not be treated as PPP mode. And the university professor said that the PPP is using the public service to undermine the government, and it's just plain wrong because people release information now. And this is citizens' personal information. So he didn't want us to know that David Patterson, he started off by David Patterson. He didn't want us to know that a Chinese company deposited 9,000 US dollars into David Patterson's personal account. How did they get his personal account? Had we not known that, we couldn't have asked the questions about what did you receive the money for? And he gave an explanation about some Bharrat and etc. And until now, he has not explained why he did not, if it was a reimbursement, why they didn't reimburse Bharrat directly. And he showed no evidence that he has reimbursed Bharrat. But he doesn't want that to come out because that's a citizen private information or duty-free concession. For your official capacity, it's private information. Trust me, if they were revealing things about the PPP, he would be saying they deserve national awards because that's their patriotic duty. But now, this is the sort of thing. This is the most vile article. If I had a modicum of respect for the gentleman, it's gone now because he's calling for a commission of inquiry into the public service with the aim of flushing out PPP moles. You must hire people to go and hunt in every ministry who are PPP people. And largely because they're releasing information that is showing how corrupt this government is. So now you see, now the people of Ghana really see who David Hines truly is, and that when it comes to defending the government, all these principles that they thrived on over the years, they made that a business about representing Afro-Guyanese. Not a word from him about the 168 million that went to the elite, where ordinary Afro-Guyanese did not benefit from a single cent of it that the government gave the elites, a couple of them. Not a word about that, but, or when the farmers, like at MMA now, even now, they can't pay their bills and these are Afro-Guyanese families because the charges are increased. What about those people or the vendors? They wouldn't defend them. They defend corruption all the time in the guise of fighting for Afro-Guyanese rights. Not a single day would they do that. So, the next issue, I'm taking a break from the corruption team. I'll come back to it just now, the kleptocracy. Kleptocracy. So we have blackouts. Everybody is speaking about that now. So today's paper, more reliable power by the end of 2020, GPL CEO. Remember, I told you what I said to the president several years ago. Decisions made then, they have a lag effect. If you're not putting in generating capacity and you have older units and you're at peak with no reserve, you're going to end up in a situation like this. There's absolutely no reserve because your install capacity and your peak demand is the same. So anything that happens here, you're in trouble. So Amila was supposed to bring 150 megawatts at least into the system, and the existing sets would have gone into reserves. So just in case when there's a low period like droughts, etc., you bring them out of reserve to keep the power going. And when they, like you have full water and we generate all the power, you just put them back in reserve, mudball them. That was the idea. So now they've resumed talks. Chronicle said they have resumed talks that's on the 2nd of June. There's a plan to end blackouts. And they've resumed talks with the wind power people. And how many times are we going to say this? Buying wind power, even if it is not, if it's feasible, and it's not corrupt, because one of their sympathizers is the developer. The person who built the AFC office is the one who is talking about the project they're talking with. But even if it was a clean contract, wind power is not buying capacity, it's buying energy. What about the periods when the wind stops blowing? And there are several periods during the course of the day and in the night. You still need the fossil fuel to step up at that time. Because when the wind stops blowing, it goes down to zero. You go down to zero. And so you have to then match that with the comparable capacity to pick up that. You can't build future or satisfy future demand on buying just energy. You have to also install capacity. Just buying the energy from that kind of tenuous source, a tenuous source that moves up and down, unlike the hydro, which is pretty stable because the reservoir allows water to be there all the time. So that's the point. So what we've seen here is not the minister now came out and said, oh, the PPP is to be blamed for this because the cable, the submarine cable got cut a couple days ago. Now, before that, a month ago, when we had blackouts, it was routine maintenance. Then it was the one line we have between the two substations, one at Sophia and one at GPL. A whole spate of that they're working on the transmission mains. For the past several weeks, that was the excuse. Now suddenly, it's the submarine cable. And PPP is to be blamed because we put that submarine cable there. Now, all the years, they are benefiting from the same investments made by the PPP. In the first year in office, they said they published achievements after a year. We ended blackout in Guyana. If you go back, you should go back and see their list of public achievements. Every year they put that out. For 4 years they've been putting that out, ending blackout in Guyana. So it wasn't a problem at that time. But the real issue has been, one, there's been no board of GPL. The minister was running it. And it's not just GPL, the staff there. It's the minister who is responsible for all of this and this government. The minister directly. They didn't appoint the board and this cabinet. They didn't appoint a board for a year and a half. How could you have a corporation like that and not pay attention to that? How are the issues of generation and all of that dealt with? The minister is totally inept. He's only looking for other things on the side, not looking for main issue. Secondly, he had time to do 2 contracts, which are all both signed by the Chinese companies that are about $5 million above the engineer's estimate or the next closest tender. We believe they're corrupt contracts. They've had time to do that. They've had time to run down the over $20 billion that accumulated in the period when the oil prices fell in 2015 and 2016, and they didn't adjust the rates. They accumulated in an account over $20 billion. Ran that down too. Now they're looking for financing, they said. He has had time to dismantle the Wärtsilä contract, claiming it was costing us too much. So he put his own people, he's running it, he's saving us money. Well, one of the things with that contract is that when they kept spare parts, in a contract of that nature, if you don't have a management contract, you go to the back of the line in a global company when you're buying spares. 2, all the diagnostic and other capabilities of the company are not at your disposal. So I heard they bought some spares from another part of the world that were not compatible, burnt up the alternator. So this is what's going on at GPL, and it's all because this minister has interfered too much. He's interfered. You can't blame the operational people at GPL. It is just that the guys did not have enough investments in the right area, and they're struggling with the system. It is the cabinet and this minister. And as I said before, I pointed this out to the president at the beginning. So even now, if they were to make a decision tomorrow to go in to buy a new generator, it will come a year from now. And you recall they had advertised for one. which was dual-in-purpose gas and I think it was fuel oil. And then they adjusted the bids. This was 2 years ago. Never pursued the project to the end. So this is ineptitude in government. Every time you get a blackout, don't blame GPL. It's Patterson and this cabinet that are responsible. Their warning signs were there from the beginning, but they chose to either take off the money, do the corrupt deals, neglect their board, neglect investments, etc. And we left them with a large sums of money. We had left them with over 30 million US dollars on an IDB loan to address some of the concerns. So there's no redundancy in the system. The reserves are all gone. I see now they said they're going to buy power from the private sector. So we don't have much hope that things will improve in the short term, but don't harass the GPL man who comes on the pole to fix your light. He has nothing to do with this. Don't harass him when he comes to your village or your part of the city or anything. They're not to be blamed for this. This is ineptitude at the highest level that has led us to this situation. The next issue I want to deal with is the question of I saw a letter from some junior officers from the Army. It was an anonymous letter, and I saw the Ministry of the Presidency responded to this. Thankfully, they didn't say that it's a PPP mole who wrote the letter. But trust me, they will come around to that eventually. Everything is bad about the PPP. You remember the letter, the anonymous letter about Basil Williams? That their standard excuse is when the real issues are raised in that letter. Look how many major issues are raised in that letter which could easily be investigated. And the easiest way to get out of it is to say, oh, the PPP raised that. It's the PPP wrote this letter. PPP did not write that letter. But that whole issue has been swept under the carpet also. But you just need to look at the track record of people leaving that office to see that it had elements of truth, or maybe totally true, the letter. So it warranted an investigation, but they didn't do anything because Basil Williams claimed PPP wrote the letter. Well, in this case, the government's response was the president was trying to fix organizational neglect over the years that caused the destruction of the National Cadet Corps, etc. Now, I'm not sure that the National Cadet Corps was destroyed. In fact, when I turned to the National Cadet Scheme to prepare 50 officers, in fact, close to 60 of them, through the cadet program for the police, the fire service, and the prison service, apart from those who were trained directly for the Army. And they're good officers, and they did extremely well. I'm not sure that the system was destroyed, as they claimed in this response from the Ministry of the Presidency. That's one. But just see how ingenious this is, or disingenuous this is. This government now has hired former Chief of Staff Attlee, former Chief of Staff Collins, and former Chief of Staff Gary Bess. Together, they spanned almost 2 decades or so, a decade and a half of governance at GDF, at the helm of the GDF. So what they are saying is that those people presided over the destruction of the National Cadet Corps. And they have all of them in the bosom across there. And that's what they're saying. The PPP led to that. So that's the first thing. And secondly, because the letter said the president was interfering, they said in the response from the Ministry of the Presidency that the president, in his private capacity before entering office, compiled a book called Values and Standards of the GDF. So imagine what they are saying. They didn't deny interfering. They're saying the president, when he was a private citizen, compiled a book, and now implying that the army, a state institution, must follow what the president compiled when he was in the not even president. So they have only confirmed now what the officers are saying, that there is operational interference. So if you scan the response, you will see no attempt to address the critical issues raised by the officers. The first one deals with promotion. They're saying that the changes that the junior officers have a shifting goalpost to meet to get to be promoted, and that the standards and the rules keep changing all the while, and that they're done based on the whims and the fancies of the Ministry of the Presidency, and it's not discussed with the senior officers even in the GDF. That is a very specific allegation, that it's done this way, that therefore the promotions, officers' promotions are affected and they don't get explanations. That was one allegation. The second one dealt with interdiction. They said the rule has been changed now, that if you're interdicted and 1 year passes, and the instruction from the Ministry of the Presidency and the President is to terminate your employment. And so they're saying the court matter could even take more than a year. So if their employment is terminated now before the case is concluded and they prevail, how do they then address that situation? This is a specific allegation. And the third issue deals with retirement versus resignation. They claimed in the past, once they had served after 20 years, they were free to leave, to retire from the army with all their benefits, once they had met that threshold, 20 years. So this government has changed this now to say that even if you finish the 20 years and you want to retire, you can't get your full benefits because we'll treat it as a resignation. Therefore, you don't get any of your benefits. You have to wait out all the years. So if you have another 5 years to go in your rank, each rank has a year to retire, you have to wait for that. That's the only time you'll get your benefits. So this is a big change too. And none of the release did not address any of these issues. Now, all I want to say to the Army is to ensure that we treat our soldiers well, and or the joint services, and that we are not going to attempt to politicize it. But if these concerns are being raised, and now publicly, then they need to be addressed. And if they're counterproductive, I think the government should change this. Like we've said, we reinstate the joint services bonus, because this government has described the joint services bonus as a bribe to people from the joint services, because there may be PPP molds to all of them. There may be PPP molds. You remember Jordan said we had to take that away. It's a bribe that the PPP gave to joint services, the joint services. So this is a major issue for me, because this would affect the morale of the Army. Guess what they said? Apart from those issues, the release says, oh, the officers are being trained to conduct horseback patrols. We acquire some equipment from China to build roads, and we've operationally deployed to our western border. These have nothing to do with the issues that they were raised in the letter. These are routine issues of training, etc. But it's called obfuscation. You don't tackle the concern raised by the officers, the real concerns. You talk about everything under the sun, and the primacy of the ideas of the commander-in-chief, which he developed when he was in opposition, and that everyone now has to follow. This issue of the Marriott, coming back to the corruption team now. So tender scrap for Marriott Casino after minister holds secret talks with investor. So major problem here. Then the minister Jaipal Sharma said that they met also with everyone else under the sun. So according to Sharma, when he met with the princess officials, he was told they had made appointments with other ministers, including Jordan, then Minister of State Joseph Harman, then Minister of Business Dominic Gaskin, and Minister Amna Ali. I was the first minister that readily agreed to meet with them. So why would the person mention to the reporter that AHI quashed the expression of interest because of a private meeting with a minister? So this stinks. This stinks. And let me tell you what, remember this was supposed to be a corrupt PPP project. The Marriott Hotel, and it's supposed to be a hospital. They're converting it. Now it's probably one of the most profitable hotels anywhere in the world. And they need more rooms. In fact, I'm hearing they said they want to expand. And the government owns 100% of it. But the value would substantially be enhanced if you had a casino operation there too, because people pay a premium for that license. So the value to our country and to the treasury will be greatly enhanced. So we thought they will go ahead and pursue the plans as we had before. I believe that this is all, let me just say, Princess Casino has now succeeded in scrapping a bid and scrapping competition. And these ministers, that's my business. The ministers and the people who are putting out the bid, the board, are complicit in this. They have achieved their purpose. So we have nothing now, there's no competition. There's no competition. So because when you have one license and one operating casino, you get all the benefits. So this stinks too. This stinks. And almost every area. We have heard the Sarah Kaichor News, June 2nd. Sarah finds state properties left in the wills for officials' children. And Eric Phillips has discovered this now. The Sarah has discovered this. So when asked, he declined to provide names. He said that instances were found in almost all the regions. Now they're not ashamed to put out our names, etc. Why don't they release the names of the officials? Half of them are APNU people, more than half are APNU. That is why he raises the issue. So let him release the names of the people who have taken state assets and put this in their will in the regions. It would be great to have, if they believe in transparency, then all the names should be in the public domain by now. We're urging them to do this. We're urging them to do this. So we're still waiting for David Patterson to answer the questions about the 9,000 US, and we want to see evidence of when it was paid over back to Bharrat. We're still waiting for answers to that. Notice, gone quiet. We're still waiting on the Simona brooms. And we will be writing to the Public Procurement Commission about the report that they did. We say we'd like, now that this information has come to light, how a $148 million contract awarded for the Demerara Harbor Bridge studies could be, how $285 million could be withdrawn from the Demerara Harbor Bridge account for that project to fund a $148 million project. We want explanations, and maybe they will be able to provide those. We have noticed with the oil and gas thing about that the extensive, the statement from Ramatar. And what is interesting though is that the same, I believe this is a shakedown. Already somebody told me that one of the people from the oil company said that one of the members of SARA asked for a meeting abroad to discuss this with them. So it's another attempt to shake down a member of SARA. So Clive Thomas said to Bloomberg that they're investigating the Stabroek block, the Kanji block, Kaichor, and Orenduke. So that's what he said. So that seems nonpartisan. You're looking at both what the PPP did and APNU did. And as we said before, once it's done by an independent organization, we have nothing to fear. We'd like to participate in that too. But then Retimaya says to Associated Press, we're looking at Kanji and Kaichor. So only the two that are signed by the PPP now in that period, he dropped the Stabroek and Orenduke block. Yet the Orenduke block was signed in January 2016 and were on the same terms and conditions as the Kaichor and Kanji blocks. So he dropped that. Then Retimaya says, chipped in forward and says there was no public auction. Now, until now, that time we didn't have a production agreement. We didn't have until now they have not decided to auction the blocks. And he's complaining, oh, in 2015 we didn't have a public auction before we found oil. And then Eric Phillips says he's surprised we didn't have a signing bonus. And that's an exploration contract versus a production contract. When you go to production, you do the signing bonus. This is a political issue and a chance to shake down people. Nothing much will come out of it. But we made it clear, investigation or no investigation, that the production agreements for future oil companies, regardless of what they sign, will change significantly from what ExxonMobil got. The production agreements are going to reflect more benefits to Guyana. I made it clear about that. So regardless of what happens, investigation or no investigation, and we said to ExxonMobil too, that if you're part of the other blocks, etc., and you are investing in there, if you come back to sign an agreement, you're not getting the same conditions. We made that clear, and I'm saying it here. I can say it publicly. I've said it before. So regardless of what was signed here. And so, because the basin has been de-risked now. And so that's how I will address it. I just wanted to see, I saw at the Hugo Chavez Center, the president wants to end homelessness. So that's the president's latest speech. I want to end homelessness and then end it before I leave office. So he couldn't be talking about giving house lots to everyone because they have not developed one single new house lot, although I think that is what he had in mind, but they have not developed a single one. So I think he wanted to put us all at Hugo Chavez Center or everybody, because that's a center for homeless people. But if he wants to put us there, he has to improve the place. You saw over the weekend they advertised for new staff from top to bottom. So the Amnali and Carol Joseph are responsible up there. And it's a cesspool of corruption, millions missing. That's why they had to fire everyone. I heard even Carol Joseph was fired. And so somebody needs to track this down. They're hiring entire new staff in that area. And so that is it. We need to find out what the role that Amnali and Carol Joseph have been playing in the Hugo Chavez Center. And the money that is assigned to the place have been siphoned off rather than helping the homeless people, being siphoned off again into the pockets of individuals. So that's another area for corruption. On the Sherrod Duncan reinstatement, somebody said to me this morning, this is the first decision that Nagamutu made in the 5th year in office. First one. But we all know, it's transparent that the only reason that he was reinstated is because he was appointed the chairman of the Georgetown group district of the AFC, and he would have delegates. And so Nagamutu, opportunistically, now he wants the support, so a deal was cut to reinstate him. Forget the transparency, forget about the thievery of public resources, etc. And then the Trotman, because Trotman doesn't support Ramjatan, so he supports Nagamutu. So Trotman obviously would support the reinstatement of Sherrod Duncan, because it seems as though a nice little cozy deal was cut, that you give me back my job, I'll deliver the delegates to you at the Congress. And so I'm not surprised that it's done, but it's unethical, and it shows the true nature of the AFC. They will trade away all the so-called principles just for their own internal purpose. But I want to show you something that our Robert Stamp Prime Minister did. This is one of his campaign material for the Congress. So millions of dollars were spent putting together this booklet. If you see some of the quotes here, like our indigenous people, cradle of our civilization, and his quotation, you have to love something that is bigger than yourself, greater than yourself, which is Guyana. So he has quotations everywhere. I've counted, they have 53 pictures in this booklet. 42 are of the Prime Minister. None of the presidents, zero. Ramjatan doesn't even make the back page here, right? And this is 42 pictures. Listen, even Kim Il-sung would be ashamed of this. Kim Il-sung would be ashamed of this. This is state resources. And all nonsense. You read it, happy moments, cycle of elections, my love for everyone, social cohesion, you know. Look at it. Pure nonsense here. Obviously, the morning, this would be in the delegates' bags, or you put it on, hand it out around the place. He would hand it around the place. This is government, taxpayers, well, the taxpayers funding his campaign material. Ramjatan should object, he should do one too. But he himself is now much better. What would he put? A spate of crime all around the country? You know? Visiting and couple burning prisons and stuff like that. And then get the poor commissioner of police struggling to go to a press conference, to obviously under a lot of pressure to justify the law, what's going on in the country now. So I don't know. I didn't want to raise this here because it may help the Ramjatan, who is just as bad as Nagamutu. But this is what we have. So coming back to the key issues. Kleptocracy, state-sponsored. That's how I started. Hugo Chavez stealing there. Lands and Survey rushing to sell out everything. The SPU and Gaisuko, again there. MMA, a deal. They're taking back lands now all the time from the cattle people, etc., giving it to party supporters, selling off the land. The gold board and the prospecting licenses, corruption there. Selling of gun licenses, the public security ministry, corruption there. Selling of work permits, Department of the citizenship there. GRA, want of entry for vehicles, giving the vehicles, etc., to party activists, corruption there. The fuel racket, you know who I'm talking about there. Gaming authority, the gaming authority, their own runnings there. On solar panels even, we're paying for solar panels for the party office, for ministers, private home, etc. Everything is a shakedown. Every department now is running their own racket. That is why I'm saying Granger is presiding over a kleptocracy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. Abina Rockwood, Ghan Standard. On the Exxon land giveaway, you noted two things. One, you want to know if this is coming on the direct investment or if it's calling on the cost file. And if it's coming on the direct investment, why the peppercorn fees, etc. Yeah. But is that to say that you wouldn't have any concerns if it's coming on the cost oil?
I have more concerns.
Okay, just want to make that clear. Also,
I have more concerns because we should be jointly making those decisions that come out of cost oil, because we are paying half of it from our share of cost oil is 50%. That is meaning we're carrying 50% of the cost.
Okay, and you said that you kept quiet before, even though you had concerns when they had the 10 acres over. Why did you keep quiet?
Because I thought maybe it's just a one-off thing. That it's a one-off and they wanted a headquarters. But this is becoming a pattern. And there's nothing, no explanation from our government. I just thought it's a one-off thing.
10 acres though.
Yes.
All right. You spoke about GRA and the revenue racket. Does this mean, if this racket is continuing for the long time that you've been speaking about it over 2 years now at every week press conference, does it mean that you have no confidence in the current management of the Ghana Revenue Authority to address these issues?
I would like to ask the commissioner, you to ask the commissioner, because the commissioner has been very vocal on his efforts to collect revenue. So you ask the commissioner if he's aware of this. Ask him if he's aware of it and give him this specific case. And then it's simple. All the commissioner has to do, if he is concerned, just as concerned as I am, call in the Auditor General. Because if you call in the Auditor General, I call the Auditor General in. There's an assault on the Auditor General. The more he exposes corruption, the government will do this and try to disparage the Auditor General. So let the commissioner, simple thing, all he has to do is to have a private firm investigate it, not internal audit, or call in the Auditor General. And then I will say that the commissioner didn't know about it, and the commissioner is making a big effort, if he does that, to address it. But don't go like Jordan or this Hines and talk about whistleblowers now, because that's government revenue.
On the Princess Casino, the Marriott Casino, the two, you said that Princess has succeeded in its efforts. Are you saying that government ministers somehow colluded with Princess to maintain its monopoly held by the hotel? And if you're saying that, are you therefore suggesting that there was some kind of bribery passing? I don't know, I just want to get...
Notice what I'm talking about. I'm talking about kleptocracy today, and I said it stinks. You draw your conclusion.
About the country and title blocks. You made your point that you have no problems with the investigation once it's conducted by an international agency. But setting aside the investigation, are you, Bharrat, concerned about the fact that these companies were given the blocks, control of the blocks, without any wherewithal and without the expertise needed or the experience in oil exploration?
The thing is that I looked at the explanation carefully given by the former president, and when it started, when the discussion started, and when the licenses were approved too, for these very same people. So obviously, that was long before when they were finally signed. He has made this very explicit in his letter, his press release. Now, you have to understand the period too. The period pre-oil was a tough period. We did not have the same number of takers who are lining up now to come to Guyana and to acquire a block. And so that is the issue is, at this point in time, when you have more interest than you have available blocks to give out, you have to auction it. When you have more blocks and less interest in taking up those blocks, because there is no possibility, or at that time there was no find there, then you probably have to be a bit more generous. And that is how I see it.
Okay, I understand that, but how these oil companies work? They do the seismic data and they get an understanding of what is where before they actually go down. So are you saying that the PPP allowed Exxon to operate offshore, didn't have any idea of what's going on there, to know that during the period 2014 time that they were very close to possibly making a find because of the data you would have been receiving?
Do you think any oil company will tell you whether they're close to a find or not? No. The issue is, we could have all the seismic data, 2D, 3Ds, etc. You could give every specialist in Guyana, but with all the seismic data, you have to have an interpretation of the data. It's the interpretation that matters. So when Shell decided in 2014, Shell, which is a major company in the world, had the seismic data, you understand? They pulled out and sold their share of that same block that Exxon found all this oil in for $1. They made a judgment, this place has nothing, or else they wouldn't have pulled out. The most lucrative area. You imagine that a company that is one of the biggest in the world with all the in-house expertise made that determination. We, through our GGMC, could have made come to a different conclusion. Oh, please, don't. Right? So I'm not disparaging anybody, but really, we don't have the expertise. And a big company like that couldn't do it. They just gave up the thing for $1 in 2014. And then in 2015, it's the biggest oil find. And Shell gave it up for $1. That same area that people think is a gold mine now. So that just shows how tenuous it is, how hard it was to get people to invest in that period, pre-oil. Now everybody running us down. And that's why I'm saying auction the future blocks. So that is you have to go back to the mindset of that era, pre-oil. The media never asked about this. The media didn't even ask about it. Now it's the biggest topic in the media. So that is how I see it. Okay. Mindset is important.
Kiteshore News. Mr. Jagdeo, on the Kiteshore and Kanji blocks, they require, I think you call it deep water drilling to be done on them, right? And there are only just a small handful of companies globally that can do that. But the ones that got the blocks couldn't. Don't you think that more could have been done to assess the capacity of these companies to drill?
This is precisely what, if you go back to the mindset, is that you're hoping that at that time, with nobody taking the blocks, that you will get somebody who will probably go and look for a partner, and generate some interest in the area, because nobody is getting. Now, if you get a block, you can become rich overnight, because everybody knows we're already oil producing. But at that time, if you get a block, it was still considered a cost to people. not as an asset. And that's why Shell gave it up. Shell gave up this area, which is the better area than what the others got. A better area in 2014.
Would you review the agreement?
We made it clear. I just said to you.
No. You said future, nobody else would get that.
Yes, exactly, and that's
But
precisely
this
means.
particular case, do you think it's worth it?
But the thing is that if I said already that the production agreement will look very different than what Exxon got.
You're talking about future. I'm speaking about the existing agreement.
No, because they have to explore now. But after they explore, they have to come to a production agreement. And that's when you sit down with, because today we've made it clear we are a big player. We have 5 billion barrels of proven oil. So that's why I'm saying, if this government found reason to renegotiate the Exxon contract and make it even more lucrative, in my view, than 1999, even more lucrative, there has to be a reason why we can review all those not exploration contracts that were issued when we come to the production stage, because now we have 5 billion barrels of proven oil out there. And I made it clear from the beginning. That is why I was kind of upset that this government was rushing in the parliament to accord similar concessions to what Exxon got when we said no future company should get the same concessions. Every week, and we were saying, why not put a hold on that until you have the model production, the agreement that they said they're working on. So it is just, you got to go back to the mindset. But the reason Sarah is getting involved now, it's a political issue, as you can see. Political, Bretty Meyer wants to focus on these two alone, not the four like Clive Thomas. And two, it's a shakedown, talking nonsense about auctioning at that time when you're not takers. But now you can't auction when you have so many people.
And how do you feel about the comparison that is being made between what happened under Ramatar with what happened in Senegal?
Oh, Ramatar is not a Senegalese, so Ramatar is here. I just compared what has happened between that period and now. And Ramatar issued a comprehensive statement outlining timelines. What the newspapers should do, I saw he complained that Kaichor didn't carry his statement, but they should carry the statement, even if you don't share the views and you criticize it, but at least carry his side of the story, which is a comprehensive explanation about timelines, etc.
Are you aware of what happened in Senegal?
I've seen in the papers. I'm not worried about. I'm dealing with Ghana. I can tell you about what happened in Chad, what happened in Venezuela, what happened in Trinidad and Tobago, Angola, Equatorial Guinea. Right, exactly. But that is why I said we have to, as a country, ensure that we don't go down the same path. Okay?
Are you aware of what happened in Senegal?
I look at it. I'm not dealing. You tell me what happened. I don't know what happened in Senegal. You tell me. So what happened in Senegal? Since you want me to talk about Senegal now, yeah. What happened in Senegal?
Well, what happened
Yeah.
is that a concession was given to a company called Petrotim that was formed weeks after the contract was signed with the other company. And comparing that situation to this one.
Since he had no experience and there
No
seemed to be a little triangle between him and the president's brother and the president, and
Yes.
it seems to be like there was something.
Okay, so there's a triangle. I'm not sure that Ramatar had a triangle when he decided on this, because it was determined by GGMC. And we've made it clear. Ramatar said it and I said it. We not opposed to an investigation of it. So unlike some countries that will be saying, oh, we defend it at all costs, let's have an investigation, because we're convinced there was no wrongdoing. Whatever the outcome is, we'll live with the outcome.
Okay.
That is it. What more do you want than that from the PPP? They say, let's have an impartial investigation, not by Sarah and the others, the government henchmen there, and whatever the outcome, we'll deal with it. But so Yes, because I wanted to talk about the government kleptocracy. It's interesting, I just listed all these issues, and but it seems as though people are still only interested in what the PVP did. If you had,
You're wrong.
you're really?
You're not fair.
Yeah,
I
all
had
right,
several questions on
all
other
right,
things.
okay,
to
all right.
talk about.
Thank you. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
CITI has come out again criticizing the PSA exam, well, rather their subsidiary SO, that it's in contravention with the Constitution, the Procurement Act. I know you've spoken about protecting the sanctity of contracts,
Yeah.
but if this contract is seen to be illegal,
Well, that's where the independent investigation would deal with all of those issues. ExxonMobil said publicly they will participate in that. So that is where the government or should hire an international forum to do this if it wants to move it forward. Then all these matters could be settled. And so Exxon said that if it finds wrongdoing, then that's what we'd have to live with.
have you been able to assess some of the major policies in the recently published real estate strategy?
Yes, and yes, it's just, it's depressing.
Well, as the opposition, I expect you to say that, but I was kind of hoping you would speak to particular policies.
Well, the thing is that it has no job creation initiative, no projects. How could, it's all declarative. What do I say about something that is declarative? A cut and paste document. I can tell you where sections came from. So how are they going to address clean energy? Clean energy is critical. Clean energy is probably 35% of global carbon emissions. How are they going to address that? Not a single word in this document. In fact, all we're hearing from government, we're going to do solar panels, a couple of things, gas, etc. Nothing, nothing about this. All to say now we have to do studies for the future. We've gone past studies. We outlined how we were going to decarbonize the energy sector, specific ways. We said hydropower, which will do about 90% of our energy needs, decarbonize. We will then go for the isolated systems for wind and solar, like Wakanam and Leg 1, where you may have smaller units with wind, and then solar for some of the hinterland areas and wind for the hinterland areas. We made it clear. So that's one. Two, where are the job creating initiatives in the strategy? We had several. We had a small loan scheme. We had the Center for Biodiversity Studies, a global center for biodiversity studies, etc. They're funding the Amerindian the village plans for economic upliftment. That's three. Where is anything on adaptation? Nothing in the strategy. So I'm telling you specifics now. You know, it's not just, it's a gaffe, totally useless strategy. Okay, thank you.